now move straight into our second keynote contribution. We will be joined in just a few minutes by four of the participants in Ireland's Children and Young People's Assembly on Biodiversity Loss. The Assembly was an innovative experiment in deliberative democracy that brought together 35 children and young people from across Ireland. The members of the Assembly were chosen through what's called a process of stratified random sampling to capture the diversity of the Irish population. So they essentially looked like a mirror image of the wider population of children and young people. The Assembly ran in parallel with a Citizens' Assembly on Biodiversity Loss for the adult population. And this represented one of the first instances anywhere in the world of a Children and Young People's Citizens' Assembly and an Adult Citizens' Assembly running side by side and deliberating on the same topic. I had the privilege of being involved in designing and running the Assembly, working with an intergenerational team consisting of colleagues from DCU, including Darren Clark, who you heard from a moment ago, colleagues in University College Cork, and Terra des Hommes, and a wonderful young advisory team of 9 children and young people from across Ireland, one of whom you will be meeting very shortly. The Assembly met over 2 weekends in October 2022. At the end of their second weekend, the Assembly presented their calls to action to Minister Malcolm Noonan. But the story didn't end there. Representatives from the Assembly met with members of the Adults Citizens' Assembly the following month in November 2022, and then last October they met with the Oireachtas Committee on the Environment and Climate Action, and you will be hearing more from the children and young people themselves about those 2 meetings in a few minutes. Members of the Assembly have also met with Wicklow County Council. They've appeared in a number of podcasts and webinars, and their work has featured in a range of media coverage. In terms of the format of this keynote, it'll be a little bit different to the other 2 keynotes we have today. It will begin with a wonderful video capturing the story and the key outcomes of the Assembly. This will be followed by a conversation among the 4 children and young people themselves, and then finally we'll open up to questions from the audience. Although the format of this session is more akin to the other panel discussions we have today rather than the other keynotes, we wanted to signal through the design of the programme that we are according the same status to this keynote as to the other 2 keynotes today. An important housekeeping announcement is that the children and young people participating have requested that no photos or videos be taken of the session other than those being taken by the official DCU photographer and videographers. Thank you for your cooperation in this regard. So we'll now play the video.
In September 2022, 35 children and young people, aged 7 to 17 from across Ireland, were randomly selected to be members of Ireland's first Children and Young People's Assembly on Biodiversity Loss. We are some of the children and young people who were chosen, and we are excited to tell you about what happened next. We spent 2 weekends together, one in beautiful County Wicklow and our second weekend in Killarney National Park in County Kerry. We spent our first weekend learning about biodiversity and the causes of biodiversity loss. We had a lot of fun playing games, getting creative, and spending time outside, exploring a local nature reserve, which we really loved. We spent our second weekend working together to come up with our vision for the future and our calls to action, which we are excited to share with you.
Our Assembly's vision is an Ireland where we are connected to and care for the rights of nature and each other, so that biodiversity is restored and protected, and we live and grow up in healthy, clean and fair environments.
We also created 6 key messages that we want everyone to know.
We must treat the earth like a member of the family or a close friend.
Future generations must live in a world where there isn't a biodiversity crisis and where children don't have to take action because of the inaction of past generations.
Every decision must take biodiversity into account.
Children and young people must be included in decisions being made about biodiversity.
Biodiversity protection must be a shared responsibility and a global collaborative effort.
We must consume resources in a sustainable, moderate way that neither diminishes the environment, biodiversity, or our rights, well-being, and livelihoods.
We also created 58 calls to action, which fall under 7 key themes.
To provide education for children, young people, and adults that helps them to understand biodiversity loss, the consequences of our actions, and the things that we can do to address this issue.
To put biodiversity and the rights of nature at the heart of decisions that we make.
To create energy and transport systems which limit our impact on the environment and biodiversity.
To limit the impact of things we buy and use on the environment and biodiversity, and support sustainable ways of living.
To restore and rewild environments which support our biodiversity, including urban and rural places, and develop national parks.
To protect our habitats and native species from the impact of invasive species and land use change.
To address biodiversity loss caused by over-exploitation. To make sure places where we grow and gather our food are places where biodiversity can thrive, and the people who work in these places are helped to tackle biodiversity loss.
Minister Malcolm Noonan joined us at the end of our second weekend to receive our calls to action. He promised that our recommendations will inform Ireland's policies on biodiversity loss.
I'm here today to meet with the children and young people who are involved in the Assembly. It was something that at the outset, when the Citizens' Assembly was being developed for biodiversity, I felt it vitally important that young people had a voice, and not just a voice, but a meaningful voice. The UN Charter for the Rights of Children states that we must include the voices of children and young people. That's a fundamental right. But secondly, it must be done in a way that is meaningful. It can't be tokenistic. We can't be ticking boxes and say we have consulted with young people. They need to have their voices included, and the outputs of any work that we do on national policy or local policy must reflect those voices. And I think that's what's being done here today and over the last number of weeks with the Children and Young People's Assembly. And by doing that, we take on board those testimonials and capture exactly the way young people are feeling.
Our final day also gave us all a chance to reflect on and celebrate our time together as an Assembly and share our hopes for the future.
Assembly was about biodiversity loss and I really enjoyed it. It was so much fun and I made tons of new friends and it was just it was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's just so nice. You'll never meet a nicer group of people, honestly. Over 4 days, we're already planning on hanging out outside the Assembly itself, meeting up, people from all around the island, and we just, we just meshed so well.
The event was really just like the best opportunity for young people to gather together and express their views and opinions on biodiversity loss and climate change. And I'm really hoping that Minister Malcolm Noonan will go off with this information and really propose it to the rest of the government, and hopefully we can see some changes in the near future. I really liked coming up with the calls of action. I thought that it felt really like we were doing something and it felt really useful. But I also loved obviously the bits in between, met loads of nice people, made some good friends, and it was just a really good experience overall.
I hope they actually take our ideas into account and make them to law, so it's actually used and not forgotten.
Our Assembly might be over, but really, this is just the beginning.
Next step is, I suppose, we're going to take what we learned and disperse it however we can, whether that's through the media or through school. Just spread our knowledge and educate more people about what we've learned and get more people on board.
The next step is getting listened to. So essentially what we need to do is make sure that we are heard and the young people of the Assembly are actually taken into account, and our ideas are put through and embedded in a policy. So that is essentially the next step, yeah.
Now, please welcome to the stage Niamh and Laura, aged 17, Conor, aged 12, and Ailidh, aged 9.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to begin by extending a very warm welcome to each of you and to thank you all for attending this year's DCU conference on climate and society. My name is Niamh. As Niamh mentioned earlier, I'm one of the young advisors for the Assembly and I am 17 years old. Almost exactly 1 year ago, our Assembly published its final report with our recommendations and calls to action on how to preserve Irish biodiversity. And these were also submitted to the Irish Government for review and for implementation. To mark that 1 year anniversary, we are here to tell you today about just how far we've come since our Assembly gatherings in 2022. Before we begin with today's keynote contribution, I would just like to remind everyone here of the importance of the Assembly. This Assembly was iconic. It made use of an intergenerational design process from beginning to end, and it ran in parallel with the Adult Citizens' Assembly on Biodiversity Loss. It included the voice of young people from beginning to end. It marked the start of what I hope will be a better future for us all. In front of you here today sits a representation of that future. In front of you today sits 4 young people who are passionate enough about the state of our planet to refuse to be ignored. We refuse to be ignored. And we represent young people everywhere. Our contributions cannot be allowed to be merely tokenistic. Our voices cannot be seen as just an echo of a long-standing cry for change. Our contributions and our voices are key to finding the solution to any problem. Today's young people are tomorrow's future, and that should be reflected in everything that we do, because our voices are integral to the success of the future. And that future can only be successful if we are willing to embrace our young people. And our young people must be made to feel that their voices and their opinions, their very presence in any democratic process matters. Because real change was made when young people were not only consulted, but valued. That is the only way forward for the sake of the planet and for the sake of democracy. Today, I ask us all to open our hearts to that way forward and to give it the chance that it deserves. Our young people everywhere across the globe deserve recognition and a chance to have their voices heard. Isn't it only right that we empower them? So, without further ado, I would like to bring us into a Q&A with some of the Assembly members here today to give you a fuller picture of what the project looked like. Thanks very much. Okay, so we're going to start with Laura. So we are, who's on our far left over there. Laura, in 2022, shortly after our Assembly's final gathering, a group of our representatives went to the Adult Citizens' Assembly on Biodiversity Loss at Malahide to confer with them about their calls to action and final report. When the Adults' Assembly published their report, they actually included that they wished for the Young People's Assembly to be taken into account in the new National Biodiversity Action Plan. Laura, here with us today, was one of the Assembly members who was at that gathering. Laura, how did it feel to have our Assembly's recommendations taken seriously by the Adults Assembly?
If I could describe how it feels to have our recommendations taken seriously by the Adults Assembly in one word, it would be empowering. Unfortunately, young people don't always have the opportunity to speak up, although I feel that young people and children are those with the most wild and wonderful and creative ideas in how we can move towards saving our planet from a climate crisis. Although it may not be the most scientific or mathematic or economical approach, I think sometimes the answer may be more simple than we think, and I think involving children in the decision and having their recommendations taken on board allows for that to be taken into account. Sorry. Go ahead, it's all right.
Our own Assembly's final report was published on the 22nd of April 2023, which just happened to be Earth Day. 1 year on from the publication of our report, how do you personally feel about the impact of the Assembly?
I personally feel an overwhelming sense of pride, both over the work that was completed throughout the Assembly and behind the scenes with the editing and the organising of the report. With help from our report, we have seen earlier this year that Minister Malcolm Noonan has further passed Ireland's newest National Biodiversity Action Plan, as well as a €34 million Life Strategic Nature project. Those are two massive steps into the future that we have seen as a direct consequence of our work. So the pride that follows is so strong, as well as the pride that comes with seeing a group of young people come together, work with something that they are passionate about and striving for difference. And it just brings hope and joy into my life personally, as I can see that that people are just eager to know about it, and something, as I am passionate about it myself, you can sometimes feel alone in your passions, especially in your own communities, in your school communities, but having come together and seeing us all work together with such ambition has really made me realise the phenomenal work of the Assembly and how the report was even more phenomenal.
Our Assembly clearly showed that the voice of children and young people is crucial in decision making. Why do you think, personally, that it is important for children and young people to be involved in decisions about biodiversity?
As Mary Robinson said earlier on in the day, generations learn from each other. As I've previously said, children have this unique way of thinking that the adult brain just simply cannot mimic. By introducing them into the decision-making process in terms of biodiversity, you are introducing a whole new strand of ideas and options that go towards finding an answer to stop climate change. Although we may not be heard all the time, as I've said previously, we are often referred to as the voices of the future. However, I feel, as well as that, we must be the voices of the present.
Thanks so much, Laura. I'm going to come to Conor next. So Conor, who is another of our Assembly members, took part in a meeting with the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Climate and Biodiversity last November. During this meeting, representatives from our Assembly met with TDs and senators to discuss how the Assembly's calls to action were to be implemented. Conor, how did you find talking to ministers and TDs?
I feel like it was kind of just a bit of a rush of I would say responsibility, or even just kind of empowering, as Laura said. It's kind of like when something you kind of dream of or think that would never happen happens, and then you get that kind of surreal rush of possibility where you think, oh, I could do this, oh, I could do that, jump to one thing next to another. And then also at the start I was very nervous because I'm talking to ministers and TDs, and after a while, after a conversation and more questions asked, it felt like having a conversation with an old friend, because they were so nice and so they were listening so much that I felt I could answer any question that they threw at me.
Conor, what did you learn from being a part of the Assembly?
I learned that you really have to kind of drive it into your own community, as if with biodiversity, because it's not like if one person knows, then everyone automatically knows. You kind of have to teach them, because it's not that they're reluctant. It's not that they're reluctant. It's just that they don't know, and they don't know how to make an impact. there's so many people that want to have a change, but they don't have an opportunity. I was lucky to get on this assembly, and I just want to make that difference in my community that kind of tells them that they can make a difference, even if they don't have the supplies and all the stuff to actually get heard. But if you recycle or do any of these things that we've been asking you to do, you are making a difference, even if you aren't acknowledged.
Conor, what 3 words would you use to describe the Assembly?
This is an easy question for me because I would describe the Assembly as fun, educational and ambitious. Because why I chose ambitious is because this project was the first of its kind. It's not like Ireland just woke up one day and said, oh, maybe we should do a children's assembly. This was planned out. And I think that this was one of the smartest ideas we've came up with for biodiversity, because it's the children's future that they're going to be living in. If adults make the choices for us, for our future, that's not how we want it, because we're going to be the ones living in this future, and we have to deal with the consequences if they make a bad decision.
And finally, Conor, why do you think it's important for children and young people to be involved in decisions about biodiversity?
Like I referenced last question, is that children have to make decisions for their own future. That's like someone walking up to your house and saying, we're going to knock this down and make it an apartment without your consent. You wouldn't let that happen. You wouldn't stand for that. It's the same thing with futures and decisions. So I think that children, I'm not saying that the children should be in the government, no, but I'm saying they should listen to ideas from the children, because obviously you don't want like a 4-year-old president, but I'd say just listen to our ideas, and maybe there should be on social media there should be people kind of saying to the government, this is an idea, or just more assemblies like this.
Very well said, Conor. Thank you. I'm going to come to Ailidh now. Ailidh was one of our Assembly members to take part in a follow-on project from the Assembly, which was called the Try Project. This project developed educational resources about biodiversity loss and the conservation of nature into an activity book, which is in use in classrooms all across Ireland at the moment. Ailidh, what was your favourite part of the Try Project?
Well, one of the key messages was educate everyone, especially kids. So we were taking ideas from the Assembly into the Try Project, and we were making those ideas into the activity book. And it was a very great feeling to see when the book was published and out in all of the schools. Yeah.
Ailidh, why do you think that it's important for children and young people to learn about nature outside in nature?
Well, when there's pictures, or if there's a video on, or if somebody's talking, you can tune out. Well, if you're in nature, it's real. You can see all the animals and plants and wildlife, and you can see the seasons changing, but you can also see the litter, and you can also see all those trees that have been cut down. And you think, do you know what? I just need to change this a bit.
Ailidh, do you think that the project was important for children and young people to have their voices heard?
Of course, because kids have big ideas and strong voices. And adults, sometimes they think about their lives and their money, and they think about the obstacles, while kids think about ways around them.
And finally, Ailidh, which of the Assembly's calls to action are most important to you, and why?
Well, I have two. The first one is every decision must take biodiversity into account, because this one's really important to me, because there might be something like, I don't know, I forgot.
That's no problem at all, Ailidh. And if it comes back to you later, you can tell us. So we now have a few minutes for questions from the audience. While I give you a chance to gather your thoughts and think about what you might want to ask our 4 children and young people, I'd like to draw to your attention, you might have seen them when you were upstairs having tea and coffee earlier on, that there are 2 fantastic murals. These were created over the 2 assembly weekends. So there's one very large one that was created on the first weekend, and that includes a lot of drawings and contributions from the children and young people, and the other one is from the second weekend. So I'd really encourage you to take a look at those during the lunch break. So I see a hand at the back there.
Thank you so much. Very good, guys. You did a really great job. During the work that you have done in the citizens' assemblies, did you see something that was missing? Let's say that you are the Taoiseach right now and you have the power actually to change things. What would you do in that position to address something that you have seen that in this opportunity was not addressed?
So that's a big question. Laura, you would like to come in?
I would say, personally, there's one major example that I can think of in my own area where there's an abandoned building somewhere. And I think citizens' assemblies are often a place where they think of ways of, it's often associated around the money involved, or who's going to knock it down, who's going to build it up, is it listed? But the building in my area would have been a perfect place to plant plants and make ecosystems or habitats for like animals or any endangered species. So I think really looking at any problem in our society today with one eye on biodiversity, I think would be a major change and a great step into the future.
Would any of the rest of you like to comment on that, or will we move on to the next question? Yeah, Ailidh?
Well, what Laura's saying, yeah.
You agree with what Laura said. And actually, that was one of your key messages, wasn't it, that all decisions should take biodiversity into account? Mm-hmm. We have a question up here in the balcony.
Hi guys, thank you so much for coming here today. I'm actually looking forward to going home to my own kids and telling them how brilliant you were and how inspirational, so well done. So my question for you is, if tomorrow there was another Children and Young People's Assembly and you were allowed to pick the subject or the topic, so thinking about your futures and where you think young people's voices should be not only consulted, but as you said, valued, what subject or topic would you pick for the next Children and Young People's Assembly?
Mm-hmm. Niamh, do you want to come in on that?
That's actually a really important question. I'm really glad that that's been asked. There is actually talk about another Children and Young People's Assembly on education, which I think is really important, which is another of our key messages, and we have a whole section of calls to action on it. In terms of biodiversity and climate, the standard of the education is just not matching the urgency of the crisis at the minute. Even in schools, we talk a lot about the science, we talk a lot about the facts, and that is really important. But as Mary Robinson said earlier, the way to move people is to get to their hearts. Climate justice is almost completely overlooked. We don't really know about what's happening in these developing regions where people are unfortunately dying, and that is the sad fact of the matter. If we want things to change, it can't go on like that. So when you're talking about the future of education and further citizens' assemblies, I think that's a really important place to start.
Would anyone else like to come in on that question? Are you? Yeah? Okay. So we have another question up on the balcony.
My name is Maureen Renta, and I'm an early childhood rights researcher down in SCTU, and I work specifically with our youngest children, so our babies and our toddlers, and listening to their ideas about biodiversity. And I wanted to congratulate all of you for all of your hard work. I'm following you flat out on Twitter, and I think you're amazing. But I wanted to just congratulate Ailidh in particular when it came to the point about nature connections and the fact and the importance of actually access and quality access for all of our children from the ages of 0 all the way up to having regular access to nature. And just, to remind everybody that, the Irish government do actually have a responsibility to do that since they ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And there's a lovely right there, it's called Article 29(1)(e), that really drives everybody forward to make sure that all of our children develop respect for the natural environment. And Ailidh, I loved your point. Thank you very much.
Ailidh, I wonder, could I use that question as an opportunity to ask you, could you say something about the nature walk that we did during the assembly?
Of course. Well, we went out on a nature walk. We went to, what was it called again?
It was Knocksink Wood near Enniskerry in County Wicklow.
Yeah. So, and we explored all the nature. We had sensory trails where we would listen and we would touch and we would use our senses, which I think is a very important way to learn. So, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Ailidh. I think that there are a number of questions down here. I think you had a chance in the earlier session, so in order to spread the opportunities, yes, the row behind.
If the adults don't implement all of your 58 calls to action from the Assembly, have any of you thought about what you're going to do next? Laura.
I have actually put a lot of thought into this, and I have just come to the conclusion that I'll have to wait until I'm the adult so I can implement them myself.
And there's a question in the row behind. Yeah, Philip there. Thanks.
Hi guys, I think you're fantastic. My name is Caitlin Breen. I work at Airfield Estate. I think you guys were there for your 1 year on event, so we were very happy to have you there. I wanted to ask you your perspective, because there's a lot of different programs that want to get young people involved and want to get young people's voices heard, and they are varying different levels of successful. But I want to ask you yourselves, what about this event made you really feel listened to and really made that difference between another event where it was just like, we'll get them all in a room and they can have a chat and we'll say we listened? But what about this event made you feel really listened to? Yeah, Conor, I'd love to hear.
So first of all, it's because we actually got funding to go to the Oireachtas, which I felt was a definite answer, but also that I actually learned something rather than just being used for info. So I learned a lot of stuff, but also I grew a huge passion for it, and my thing to get people to listen is that biodiversity technically is everything. Like, it's your food, it's your water, it's your transport, it's your football, like it's everything, almost everything that you have as your that you use every single day is part of biodiversity. And also, to properly answer your question, also being here also shows a giant amount of also being listened to, because if we weren't here and we weren't talking to you, we probably would have been at home thinking, oh my God, it's been 2 years since the assembly, where's the time gone? So yeah.
Well, yeah, because because you guys are all asking questions, And that makes us feel like we're being listened to, because if you weren't, you'd just be sitting there. You might be just, okay.
Yeah, I think what Ailidh was saying just there, it's the right adults as well. It's not just about the children. It is the adults who are doing it, like Diarmuid and Katie, who was another one of the leads who can't be here today, and everyone else who was involved in this. It takes the right adults to care. It's not simply about listening to children. It's about caring about them. It's about caring about their future. And that doesn't stop with academics or people who are running these assemblies. That takes all of us. We can all make that change. We can all make that commitment to go out and care about the future and about the people who are going to be living in it.
Just picking up on the question from Airfield, I don't think we've talked very much about that one-year reunion. Would any of you like to say anything about that? Conor?
Yeah, it was good. Yeah, we were I reunited with some friends I made there, and yeah, it was good fun, and we kind of thought of more ideas, and it was a really good experience. I really enjoyed it, and yeah, it was a great reunion. I don't know if we might be doing another reunion next year, but
Put me on the spot.
Great experience.
So one aspect of the reunion was that Malcolm Noonan came back. Would any of you like to talk about your experience of meeting him again 1 year later? Yeah, Conor, again?
I have a kind of history with Malcolm Noonan, to be honest. So, at the first assembly, I was the first person he picked out to give a medal, which was a great honour. Then at the reunion, again, I was the first person to pick out. Maybe it's alphabetical order, I don't know. But then also at the Oireachtas committee, he showed up, and one of the TDs asked me, what's your opinion on Malcolm Noonan, since he was the person who's kind of getting your ideas across. And he said, is he sound? He's like, you don't have to answer that. I said, yeah, he's very sound. But yeah, I hope he sticks with us a lot more, because I remember he mentioned us in what was it, COP26?
I think it was the Biodiversity COP15 in COP15. Montreal.
Right,
yeah. And Conor, I heard from Malcolm Noonan afterwards that he was very, very pleased that you said he was sound. We're nearly out of time. So, are there any final things that any of the four of you would like to say? Conor, again.
I would just like to thank all of you for coming, because if it weren't for you guys, we wouldn't be here, because if there's no people interested in us, we wouldn't be able to get funding from the government, we wouldn't be able to come up with the ideas. And also a huge thank you to Diarmuid and Katie, who isn't here today, but everyone who took part in this. It's been a really great experience for us, and just because without the adults, this wouldn't be a thing. So it's not like we all hate adults because we're children. We're just saying that we're not a completely different species, and we will be adults soon enough.
Well, as I hope you can gather, we all absolutely loved your contribution. It was wonderful, inspiring, empowering, and so thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.